Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This video is about a recent 100 amp main breaker panel replacement. And the reason why we're upgrading is there's no more spots inside this panel. And I was there the other day to run a line for a microwave that I guess a previous contractor connected to a lighting circuit. And so when they turned on their lights, or rather when they used the microwave and the lights were on, the lights would pulse for no apparent reason. So I saw that the microwave was on a circuit with the lighting circuit, and of course that's not right. So I was there and I put in a new 20 amp circuit, and I realized then that there was no more room inside the panel. So I came back about a week later with a new 30 circuit panel. Right? The existing panel that's there now is actually a 20 circuit a GE 100 amp main breaker. So we're going to stay at 100 amps because I don't anticipate there being any more additions to this house. It's in an association, I believe. It's an individual dwelling, or a single family dwelling, I should say. Anyhow, they needed a new panel. So what I did was, when I was there doing the microwave, I took the air conditioner circuit breaker out, being that it's January in New Jersey, so it's cold. You won't be using that air conditioning for at least another 4 or 5 months. And so I temporarily put in just the breaker, took that air conditioning breaker out, put the microwave breaker in so they could use the microwave. Then I had to come back and change this panel out. So usually I like to turn off power as soon as I can. The homeowner asked me to not turn the power off. She had to use the hairdryer real quick before I got there, or before she left. So I had to figure out how I was going to work around that. So what I did was I started tagging all the circuits here, and that's what I'm doing here by numbers. Okay, because it looks like the circuit breakers and the wiring, nothing's ever been done to this panel since it was built. I don't know if this was the 70s or maybe the 80s. So I believe that the panel legend was pretty accurate. Like I said, I was there doing work for the microwave line and the lights, and I found some of the circuit breakers correctly identified that way. It was like 2 or 3 different circuits. So I went ahead and started tagging each of these circuits. So when I take the wires, I take these cables out of this enclosure, I'll know which ones they are, and then I'll reuse the legend according to the numbers on the legend when I identify the new circuit breaker at the end of this video. So it looks like we have a 200 amp can here. And as you see this meter moving here, they're using a lot of electricity right now. I don't know what they're playing, maybe a heater or some sort, I'm not sure. So once I break this tab, and don't break this tab unless you have an electrical license and a permit to do so in New Jersey, otherwise you really get in trouble. All right, let's see what's going on here. So we got an underground service, right? And you can see these conductors. I can just tell by the size of them, by looking at them, that that's 4/0 aluminum. So I have 200 amps coming into here. But my load side here are the wires that go to the panel. Those are rated for 100 amp, which is fine as long as we don't exceed the 200 amp rating of the meter. All right, so first thing we want to do, we got all our circuits labeled, which we could have done after we healed the power. But I'm going to shed the load by turning off each of these individual breakers. All right. Then we'll turn off the main. Now we're all set. So yeah, the meter came to a close. So this is live. I'm going to pull this meter out very delicately. We don't want to break it. Alrighty. Now I'm going to bring this inside. Once that meter's been pulled, make sure you put it someplace where it won't get damaged or wet. Just be very cautious with it. The last thing you want to do is break that meter and have to call the utility company out to restore the meter or bring you a new one. So just be cautious with it. Now, I wouldn't exactly say that's rain tight, but it's not going anywhere. Obviously, even though you've just pulled the meter, you want to make sure the power has been disconnected. Always verify that. That's no joke. I believe this panel only had one double pole circuit breaker, and that was for the air conditioning condensing unit. So the first thing I like to do is like to disconnect, obviously, the power, and then I disconnect all the wiring going to the individual circuit breakers. Then I'll remove the feeders here, get them out of the way before finally disconnecting all my grounds and neutrals. And we try to do that as quickly as possible. Here I'm using my M12 Surge with a flathead bit to loosen up all the terminals and pull all the wires out. This really speeds up the process of disconnecting these conductors from the terminals. The really nice thing about this job here today with this panel is that all my conductors were long enough. I didn't have to extend any, which can really slow down your progress. So in this old panel here, you'll see the grounds and the neutrals from the same circuit under the same terminal. Because the grounded white neutral conductor is a current carrying conductor, we can no longer do that. Those neutrals need to be underneath their own terminals because they're current carrying conductors, and because the way they terminate inside that terminal, we want to make sure we get a nice contact there to the neutral, to the grounded neutral of the system. So we can no longer double tap our grounds and neutrals together. You see that a lot in these old panels. And so if I was to remove one of those circuits, not that I would do it while it's live, but suppose you want to remove a circuit and you have the wrong neutral. You think you have the right one, but now you've disconnected it. And when you go to pull it out of that terminal, you have a live conductor and you're standing on ground, and that neutral current, I promise you, will go right through you and you'll be dead. So this makes identifying neutrals a lot easier inside the panel from that requirement. But that's not the reason why they changed the code. They changed that code because if you had two different neutrals underneath the same terminal, they didn't sit the way they should be sitting. And if they become loose, they start arcing in that terminal. And then when you have that arcing in that terminal, if you've heard the term arc welding, that's exactly what's going on right there. And it'll actually mechanically become a part of that terminal strip. I've seen that a few times. I don't see that all the time, but I do see that. And also, you want to have your own individual neutral terminal for troubleshooting. It makes things a lot easier. So in these old panels, I see that a lot. Obviously, when we update the panel, we're not going to do that again. You got to remember, electrical, even though it's been around for almost 150 years, somewhere in that neighborhood, or coming up on it, it's still in its infancy when you compare it to a trade like plumbing, which goes a long way back. So when it comes to electrical work, we're constantly improving the standards of a safe, adequate electrical installation. So as you see here, what I'm doing is I'm actually straightening out these conductors from where they come out of the connectors inside the enclosure. And the reason why I'm doing that is I'm getting ready to take these conductors out of the panel, and I want to get them as straight as possible. So once I open up this sheetrock above this panel, they'll come out. Now I want to say that this was built either in the 70s or 80s, and they have these crimp-on connectors, which I've seen before down here in Ocean County. I've seen these. I don't see this too often up north, north of the Driscoll Bridge, but I see them here. Anyhow, I'm straightening out those conductors so I'm able to pull them out of the enclosure, because they've got to go back inside the panel, the new panel, once we're ready to do that. All right, so this is what happens when you open up that wall. Now, the length of the panel is actually a little bit less than this, so I probably should have measured that, but I still needed some room above to put these conductors into the top of the new panel. Anyhow, those are those old crimp-in connectors. Now, I've never seen them anyplace other than down the shore here in Ocean County. I never saw these up in Union County when I worked there a lot, or Essex, or even Hudson. But here, it's kind of common. I don't know. I never installed those. If you have, and you're an electrician watching this video, an old timer, let me know if you remember installing those and what you guys actually called those. I'd be interested to know the name. So the majority of my circuits here, they're all coming into the top, which is nice. But I did have a couple on the bottom, including the air conditioning and some other circuit. I'm not sure. Maybe it was the GFCI into the garage here. Something tells me this was built in like the early 80s, but I could be wrong. If you like this video, make sure you hit that like button. Thank you, guys. So one of the major problems I had with this job today was fitting this enclosure between the two stud bays here. Now I had the 14.5 inches, so it fit in there, but then towards the back side of that 2x4 that I'm working on right there, it was kind of like on an angle where it might have been like 14 inches in the back of the 2x4 bay there. So the panel went in, but then I couldn't get it all the way in. Sometimes the 2x4 will budge a little bit. Obviously, it's a load-bearing wall right there. It's the side of the house, the gable end. Not a huge load on that one particular 2x4 stud, but it is a load-bearing wall. So what I had to do is I just had to shave out a little bit of this 2x4 stud to fit the enclosure. And so that slowed me down a little bit. Eventually, I was able to pick out just enough off that 2x4 stud, maybe like a 1/4 inch, and the panel went in there. The other thing I had to do when I put the panel cover in is that nipple did not line up with the eccentric hole from the new enclosure. So I had to make a larger hole and then use these reducing washers, we call them donuts in the trade, to accommodate that space that was open between the nipple and the enclosure. And you'll see that later in the video. Here I'm just prepping that 2x4 wall so the enclosure will fit. I tried not to beat up that wall too bad, but I did what I had to do just to get the panel in. So here it goes in. And as you'll see, the knockout that those conductors are going through is larger than the actual nipple itself. And so you'll see here in a second, I'll put what I was just talking about, those donuts. They're reducing washers. See the big cutout there? So basically these donuts are a piece of metal that allowed me to do this in situations such as this. So that's the reducing washer, donut, aka donut. You go ahead and put the lock nut around that after the reducing washer. And then, of course, you got to put in your bonding bushing. What the bonding bushing does is there's a set screw on this bushing. And the bushing is kind of like a lock nut that goes around that nipple. And it protects the cables from when you put them in there. Seems kind of silly to have the cable in there now and then put the bonding lock nut on there. But the bonding lock nut not only prevents the conductors from getting damaged, but it creates a solid low impedance path back to the source as required by the National Electric Code. With the set screw, it attaches physically to that nipple, and then of course you run a small a small jumper wire from that lug to the equipment grounding bus here. And that completes the grounding requirements for that nipple between the meter and the main breaker electrical enclosure. All right, obviously with the 100 amp main breaker down at the bottom, some people are going to say that's supposed to be at the top. But that's not true. So the National Electric Code talks about circuit breakers, and they need to be in an orientation as such that they're west and east, okay? But then there's also a section that mentions if you're going to have the main breaker or any kind of breaker, you want to make sure that the breaker is up when it's on and down when it's off. So a lot of our 200 amp main breaker panels, some of them go north and south and some of them go west and east. So west and east is universal. You can do that. But if you're going to have a circuit breaker that's on, it's going to have to be in the up position. And if it's going to be off, it needs to be in the down position. And that's a National Electric Code requirement. I've done a lot of panels in my day, and I've taken out a lot of circuits and putting the circuits back inside the new panels. And I definitely prefer making those knockouts first and pushing the cables through and then putting the connectors in versus putting the connectors in the knockout and then trying to pull the cable through. It seems a lot easier. But this particular job, I had a couple of circuits where I had a hard time getting the white connector to go up onto the cable and into the knockout hole, but I got through. I'll leave a model number for these connectors if you're interested. I know I get a lot of replies in the comments about these connectors. I will leave the brand is Arlington and the model number in the description, so check it out. And I'm not affiliated to Amazon or anything or any sponsorship as of yet. But I get a lot of questions about those, so that's why I'm going to leave that in the description. Every conductor that you use has a ampacity rating. And when you have more than 3 current carrying conductors next to each other, especially in a conduit, or maybe even some non-metallic Romex wires together, some of those conductors, some of those cables, they need to be derated. So even though you have a 20 amp, a 12 wire, you have a 20 amp rating on that, if you have too many of those wires together, bundled together, then you need to start derating them. So it might have originally been good for 20 amps, but as you derate, and there's a chart that you would go to in the National Electric Code to derate, that 20 amp rating is now maybe 16 amps or 12 amps, depending on how many wires you have bundled together. Not something I really want to go into in this video here, but just something that you might not have never known about before when you're bundling wires together like I am here in this panel. Eventually I'll take those tie wraps off and then they won't have to be derated. But a lot of people put those tie wraps in there for neatness. I like the way that looks, but you also have to consider derating some of those conductors, in my opinion. Okay, I know not everybody's gonna agree with me on that statement, and some might disagree, but that's okay. Anyway, I just wanted to bring that to your attention that derating conductors is a thing, and a licensed electrician will know about that. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments about derating. I don't want to go too much into it, but I'll answer a few of your questions if you'd like.
The guy said, I never wrote a review, but he did post screenshots of conversation with his Facebook page. But that went viral. What's this? I got a whole conversation. He goes, the guy goes, hey, I ordered off the Uber to receive the order or a call. Then over 3 minutes. And the business gets back. We're checking, it's rush hour. And then he goes, it's my door and no one called. And then the guy goes, it's bumper to bumper everywhere business and flooding everywhere. Getting driver info is not due yet. Would you like us to ask somebody to jump in a helicopter for you? It's fucking beautiful. And the guy writes, excuse me? Excuse me what? Someone getting you away with the fuck? And the business goes, it's rush hour, I'm pouring outside. And you ordered from Union, don't be a douchebag. That's fucking beautiful. 15 miles away, remember. I guess there was a big storm that night, there was flooding everywhere. This guy don't give a shit. Why would he care? It's all about him. He goes, I have not given you an attitude at all. Actually, if anyone's being a douchebag, it's you. I cannot believe it.
So the previous service entrance conductors were too short to reach from the meter to the new main breaker panel, so I had to replace them. I'm using 4 AUG copper conductors here on the load side of this meter to the 100 amp main breaker on the inside of the house. They pass right through that nipple. And so now I'll terminate that into the neutral terminal, and then of course The 2 hots will go to the 100 amp main breaker panel. Main breaker. And now once that's buttoned up, I'm able to go back outside and put the meter in. And then I'll come back inside and turn on the main breaker first, and then turn on the individual circuit breakers after that. And these people will have their power restored. I am going to have to return with the right interlock because I had the wrong interlock for this panel. I had a 200 amp main breaker interlock, and obviously I needed the 100 amp main breaker interlock. So I'll make a return trip. Fortunately, these are good friends of mine, and I will be able to get back there as soon as possible with the right equipment. So this is pretty important to put the circuit breaker identification tags onto the panel cover here. Take your time and do this right so it lines up with the circuit breakers so it doesn't look like hell. And you'll see I'll come back with a label maker and identify the circuits like that. And I get that a lot in the comments. You didn't identify the circuit breakers. Well, I didn't think that was so exciting, so I decided to feature that in this video so you can see that I actually do it, and it is required by the code. Now, normally I do this when I meet the inspector, but I had time today to do this, so I did it today. I also have to go back when I go back for the interlock, because I'm going to officially patch these walls here with some tape and spackle. I'm not the best at doing that, but I've been doing a lot of that at my own house, so you can see I'm getting better at it. What I'm doing there is I got a piece of sheetrock that I want to use. Instead of trying to match that cutout that's there, I use the big piece and then cut out the drywall so that the piece that I have fits right in place. And so that's what I'm doing there. I'm using that with my multi-tool. The oscillating tool works great for that. Just don't go too far so you don't hit any of those conductors. That would not be nice. Yeah, so those are not taped yet. Obviously, I'll go back and do that. And here's my finished product. Now, if you want to hit pause and get a good look at the main breaker, the main bonding jumper, my ground and neutral, and my electrodes and my bonding bushing jumper, that would be a good place to do that. Those are the protective covers that go over the lugs of the 100 amp main breaker there, so you don't accidentally get hit. That's why I'm showing that to you there. Guys, if you like this video and you enjoy the content that I put out, please do me a big favor and hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to hit the like button and notification bell, that'd be great. Thanks for coming to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the next one.